It happened on a Monday morning. Quiet, uneventful, until the thud. His wife heard it from the kitchen, the sharp sound of skin against tile, a grunt, and then silence. Her husband, 79 years old, had fallen while reaching for a towel. It wasn't the first time he had stumbled, but it was the first time he couldn't get up. At the hospital, the scans showed no broken bones. The doctors called it age-related instability. But something about that phrase felt empty, as if the problem was time itself, and not the silent decline his body had been trying to warn him about. You see, months before that fall, the signs had already begun. He had started sitting down more slowly, gripping the arms of chairs before rising. His knees wobbled when he stood at the sink, and every morning, his legs felt like heavy sacks of wet sand. He joked that he was just getting old, but beneath that laugh, he was scared. Scared of losing control. Scared of becoming invisible. Scared of depending on others for simple things like walking to the bathroom. No one had told him that after 70, the muscles in your legs begin to weaken, not just from lack of use, but from something deeper, something nutritional. Muscle isn't just made in the gym. It's built at the breakfast table, in the quiet choices of what we feed our aging bodies. And past a certain age, even if you eat well, your body might stop absorbing what it needs to stay strong. That's because the aging gut becomes less efficient at pulling nutrients from food. And without the right vitamins, the ones that fuel muscle repair, nerve communication, and bone support, your legs start to lose their memory. They forget how to respond quickly, how to catch you when you slip, how to hold you when you stand. The fall wasn't just a moment. It was the result of years of silent erosion, a process that could have been slowed, even reversed, with the right knowledge. His wife, after the scare, began searching. She didn't want another morning like that. She dug through medical articles, nutrition journals, and old advice from a retired physical therapist. And what she found wasn't a miracle drug. It was a set of essential vitamins that help older bodies do what they once did naturally, hold steady, build strength, and move with purpose. This isn't about chasing youth. It's about reclaiming safety, dignity, the ability to walk into a room without fear of the floor. And it begins, not with a treadmill or a weight, but with something far more accessible. Dr. Harold is 74, a quiet man with soft hands and a habit of listening a little longer than most physicians do. When patients come into his clinic complaining of weak legs, he doesn't rush for the prescription pad. He asks them about their mornings, not their medications, their meals. It surprised one man in particular, Robert, age 76, who had arrived expecting another round of pills for his declining strength. His steps had grown smaller, his balance shakier, and the weight he'd put on during retirement seemed to stick like glue. But instead of a list of supplements, Dr. Harold handed him a breakfast suggestion: 2 eggs, spinach, and a drizzle of olive oil. Robert was skeptical. "You think an omelet's going to fix my legs?" He chuckled. But Dr. Harold didn't laugh. He pointed to a small, faded chart on his wall. It showed how aging bodies absorb protein differently, and how, without the right vitamins to support it, that protein simply passes through, unused. Eggs, it turns out, are a quiet powerhouse when paired with the right companions. Vitamin B6, present in eggs and spinach, helps convert that protein into usable muscle fuel. It also supports nerve function, which becomes especially important when the brain starts to forget the legs are still there. Without B6, signals from the brain slow down. That hesitation you feel when standing up, that pause before stepping off a curb, it's not always about fear. Sometimes it's a chemical delay. Then there's choline, another nutrient found in eggs, which supports the integrity of muscle cells and boosts memory. Choline deficiency isn't uncommon in older adults, and the effects can feel like fog, both in the mind and in the muscles. Within weeks of changing his breakfast, Robert began noticing differences. His first clue? He could get up from the couch without pushing with both hands. A small victory, but to him, it felt like winning back a piece of himself. He also began to lose weight. Not dramatically, but steadily. Why? Because as his muscles strengthened, his body started burning more energy, even at rest. He wasn't exercising more, his body was simply working better. What Dr. Harold understood, and what many overlook, is that strength doesn't come from effort alone. It comes from nourishment that makes effort possible. We often think of food as pleasure or routine, but for someone over 70, the right meal can be medicine, not a cure-all, but a foundation, a way to whisper to the body, "I still believe in you." And sometimes, that begins with something as ordinary as an omelet. Eleanor used to wake up early. She liked mornings, the stillness, the way the light crept gently through the curtains. But over the past few years, something changed. Her mornings no longer began with peace, but with heaviness. Her legs, once nimble enough to dance in the kitchen, now felt like they had borrowed weight from the night. She described it to her daughter as dragging sacks of wet laundry. At first, she thought it was just the mattress. Then she blamed the weather. But nothing she changed, not the bed, not the shoes, not the walking aids, seemed to matter. Her steps stayed slow, her knees stiff, her feet reluctant to move forward. What Eleanor didn't know was that this weight, this invisible resistance, had little to do with age and everything to do with a deficiency almost no one talks about. Vitamin D. Often called the sunshine vitamin, vitamin D does more than protect bones. It's one of the quiet controllers of muscle strength and energy. As we age, our skin loses the ability to convert sunlight into usable vitamin D. And if we're not getting it from food or supplements, we begin to feel it, not with pain, but with effort. The effort to rise, the effort to lift, the effort to keep moving when the body whispers no. Vitamin D deficiency often shows up as fatigue, not the kind that makes you want to sleep, but the kind that makes you want to sit, to avoid walking, to hesitate before going outside. Over time, this reluctance becomes routine, and with it comes weight gain. The less we move, the slower our metabolism becomes. Fat settles where muscle once lived. The connection between vitamin D and weight isn't just about energy, though. This vitamin plays a role in how our body stores fat. Without enough of it, fat storage increases and the ability to burn calories decreases, especially around the abdomen and legs. One study even found that older adults with low levels of vitamin D were significantly more likely to struggle with balance and falls. Not because their legs had forgotten how to move, but because their muscles had lost the strength to respond. Eleanor began taking a simple D3 supplement, along with walking in the early morning sun for 15 minutes a day. It wasn't dramatic, but slowly she began to feel less resistance in her legs. The weight, while not entirely gone, no longer defined her mornings. Have you noticed your legs feeling heavier than they used to? Share your experience in the comments. Your story might help someone realize they're not alone. Martha was never one to complain. At 81, she still cooked her own meals, kept her home spotless, and enjoyed watching her garden bloom in spring. But for months, something had been slowly changing. Not loudly, subtly. Her hands would tremble slightly when holding her teacup. Her knees locked up after just a short walk. Her sleep became lighter, and her mood more fragile. "Just getting older," she'd whisper to herself. But deep down, something didn't feel right. It was her daughter, visiting from out of town, who noticed. "Mom," she said gently, "why are you limping like that?" Martha laughed it off. But later that week, she agreed to get her blood work done. The results came back with one number circled in red: magnesium, critically low. She blinked at the paper, confused. "But I eat well," she told the doctor. And she did. Vegetables, grains, very little sugar. But as the doctor explained, after a certain age, the gut often stops absorbing magnesium efficiently, especially in women past 70. Add to that certain medication she'd been taking for blood pressure, and her body had been slowly starving. Not for calories, but for this essential mineral. Magnesium isn't just about avoiding cramps. It's the mineral that allows muscles to release. Without it, the body remains tense, rigid, and prone to stiffness. It's also crucial for converting food into energy. for steady heart rhythm, and for helping the body manage stress. Martha's nighttime twitches, her shallow sleep, and even her creeping anxiety, all signs. But no one had connected them. What's more, magnesium deficiency contributes directly to muscle loss in the legs. When muscles can't properly relax, they don't repair. And without repair, there's no growth, just slow, quiet shrinking. That's why Martha's knees felt locked, and why her thighs had begun to feel like jelly after walking a single block. When she began supplementing with magnesium, along with increasing leafy greens, nuts, and a few dark chocolate squares a week, things began to shift. Her sleep deepened. Her muscles didn't feel as tight. And for the first time in months, she took a walk around her garden without pausing at every step. The truth is, many older adults are living in a state of silent deficiency. Not because they neglect themselves, but because their bodies are no longer absorbing or processing nutrients the way they used to. And often, what we chalk up to just old age is the body's quiet plea for something it can no longer find on its own. George had always been active. A retired mechanic, he used to wake up before dawn, work with his hands, move all day long. But after retiring at 68, the rhythm of his life changed. No more early mornings in the garage. No more cars to lift or parts to fetch. He still ate the same way. Oatmeal for breakfast, a sandwich for lunch, a sensible dinner. Yet, somehow, his belly began to grow. At first, he blamed the lack of activity. "I'm not moving like I used to," he told his wife. But after a year, something didn't add up. His portions had actually gotten smaller. He was walking twice a day, and still, his pants kept tightening. A routine checkup revealed what no one had suspected: a deficiency in vitamin B12. B12 is often overshadowed by other nutrients, but for older adults it's a quiet cornerstone of health. It supports red blood cell production, nerve function, and, perhaps most critically, metabolism. Without it, the body begins to slow down from the inside out. In George's case, the signs were subtle at first. He felt tired earlier in the day. His mind wasn't as sharp. Then came the tingling in his feet, and that creeping sense of frustration, like he was doing everything right but getting nowhere. What no one had told him is that after 60, the stomach often stops producing enough of the acid needed to absorb B12 from food. Even if you eat meat, eggs, or dairy, the classic sources, you might not be absorbing enough, and when B12 drops, metabolism does too. The body starts storing more fat, especially around the middle. Energy production slows, muscles weaken, and the desire to move fades, which only makes things worse. George began taking a sublingual B12 supplement, one that melts under the tongue and bypasses the stomach entirely. Within weeks, he noticed the fog lifting. He felt more alert, more capable. His walks became longer and eventually easier. He didn't drop weight overnight, but the gain stopped. His belly, once stubborn and swelling, began to soften. But what surprised him most wasn't the physical change. It was the emotional one. He no longer felt like a stranger in his own body. Fatigue after retirement isn't always laziness. Sometimes it's chemistry. And when that chemistry is corrected, the will to move and the ability to burn returns. B12 is small, invisible, and often ignored, but its absence can reshape a life, not with pain, but with slow erasure of energy, of clarity, of strength. George didn't need a new diet. He needed to give his body back a tool it had quietly lost. The photo on his daughter's phone told the whole story. Walter, once tall and broad-shouldered, now looked smaller, hunched, and tired. He wasn't in pain exactly, but he was shrinking, not just in size, but in presence. He avoided going out, avoided stairs, and when asked if he was okay, he'd say, "Just tired today." But it wasn't just today. It had been months, maybe years. He was 82. His knees ached, his belly had grown heavy, and walking from the living room to the kitchen left him winded. His daughter begged him to see a specialist. Instead, he finally agreed to try one thing: change his breakfast. She had read about it. A mix of Greek yogurt, ground flaxseed, blueberries, and a scoop of whey protein fortified with vitamins B, D, and magnesium. It didn't sound like much. But Walter, tired of feeling helpless, gave it a shot. Within a week, something shifted. His bowels were more regular, his sleep less restless. He woke up with a bit more clarity, more steadiness. After 2 weeks, he found himself standing longer in the kitchen. 3 weeks in, he didn't need to hold the wall while climbing the stairs. What happened wasn't magic. It was metabolic repair, fueled by nutrients his body had been missing for decades. The combination of high-quality protein and the right vitamins creates a powerful chain reaction in aging bodies. Protein alone isn't enough. After 70, the body struggles to synthesize muscle unless certain vitamins are present to assist the process. Vitamin B6 and B12 help convert that protein into usable amino acids. Vitamin D boosts muscle contraction, while magnesium enables muscle relaxation and recovery. Without this partnership, the protein just sits, undigested, unused. Walter's breakfast gave him more than nutrition. It gave him a structure, a ritual that told his body, "We are rebuilding." Over the next 3 months, he didn't become young again, but he became sturdy. He walked farther, carried his groceries, held his great-grandson without trembling, and slowly, the fat that had gathered in his midsection began to disappear. Not from dieting, but from movement, the kind that only returns when the body has enough energy to make effort feel possible. His story became the thumbnail of a lesson many miss. Strength at 82 doesn't start in the legs. It starts in the gut, with a breakfast that tells the muscles, you still have a job to do. Sometimes healing begins not with struggle, but with fuel. Marjorie had always done what she was told. She drank her milk, took her calcium tablets faithfully, and avoided slipping on wet floors. After all, she had seen too many friends break hips, land in rehab, and never quite return. So when her doctor told her she had osteopenia, the early stage of bone loss, she was stunned. "But I've been taking calcium for years," she protested. The doctor nodded gently. "Yes, but it might not be going where it's supposed to." That's the quiet truth no one told her, or most older adults. Calcium by itself isn't enough. In fact, when taken without the right partner, it can settle in places it shouldn't, like arteries, joints, and kidneys. And the partner it needs? Vitamin K2. Vitamin K2 acts like a traffic cop. It tells calcium where to go, straight to the bones and teeth, and more importantly, where not to go. Without K2, calcium may build up in blood vessels, contributing to stiffness, fatigue, and increased cardiovascular risk. It can also accumulate in soft tissue, making the body feel rigid instead of strong. In countries like Japan and Norway, where fermented foods rich in K2 are more common, the elderly tend to have lower fracture rates and better mobility well into their 80s and 90s. Their diets quietly protect them in ways supplements alone often can't. Marjorie had never heard of natto or aged cheeses, but she began adding small portions of K2-rich foods to her meals, along with a supplement approved by her doctor. It wasn't dramatic. Her bones didn't suddenly thicken, but she felt something shift. Her knees, which had begun to ache every morning, felt less tight. Her steps grew more confident. She didn't know how to explain it, except to say that her body no longer felt confused. She stood taller, her balance improved, and in a quiet moment of reflection, she realized it had been months since she last feared the stairs. Calcium without guidance is like bricks without a blueprint. It may accumulate, but it won't build anything useful. It needs K2, not just for bone density, but for overall mobility. We often focus on what to add: more calcium, more pills, more effort. But sometimes, what matters most is how the body uses what it's given. After 70, precision matters more than quantity. Marjorie didn't stop taking calcium. She just gave it direction, and in doing so, she gave her body permission to build, not just survive. For weeks, Henry had sat in the same chair. It faced the window, overlooking the garden he once tended every morning. He'd watch the wind shift through the trees, The birds flit from branch to branch. But he couldn't join them anymore, not because he didn't want to, but because his legs no longer listened. He was 85, widowed, a proud man who hated asking for help. Yet every time he tried to stand, he needed someone to pull him up. And each time it happened, he felt smaller, less like himself. His daughter had tried everything: walkers, physical therapy, resistance bands, but nothing seemed to stick. Nothing, that is, until a kind nurse mentioned something most people forget: inflammation. It wasn't that his muscles were weak, they were inflamed. Silent, chronic inflammation was blocking the signals between his nerves and his strength. It made every movement feel like dragging through mud, and without addressing it, no amount of exercise or effort could bring his legs back. That's when they introduced vitamin E. Not the kind found in random multivitamins, but a specific natural form known to reduce oxidative stress and ease inflammation in older tissues. Alongside a gentle anti-inflammatory diet, rich in seeds, avocados, and leafy greens, they gave his body something it hadn't felt in years: relief. Within 10 days, Henry noticed the swelling in his ankles had gone down. He slept deeper. His legs didn't throb at night. And then one morning, with no one watching, he placed his hands on the arms of the chair and rose. It wasn't graceful, but it was his. He stood and stayed standing. And then quietly, he sat back down and cried. Not because of pain, but because in that moment, he remembered himself, remembered what it felt like to own his body, to move without apology. What vitamin E helped restore wasn't just mobility, it was dignity, the feeling of being capable, present, alive. So often, we forget how much our emotions live in our muscles, how shame, frustration, and even grief take root in the body. Inflammation isn't just biological, it's emotional residue. And when it's eased, what returns isn't just strength, it's a sense of self. For Henry, that one morning changed everything. Not because of a miracle, but because his body finally had what it needed to stop fighting itself. Sometimes, the most profound healing begins in silence, in a cell that stops burning, in a joint that stops swelling, in a man who, after months of stillness, finally stands and feels like himself again. There was a time when Luis used to carry his granddaughter on his shoulders. She would giggle, tug at his ears, and call him her mountain. But lately, even standing up from the couch left him breathless. The strong legs that once climbed ladders, danced at weddings, and walked miles now hesitated with every step. He tried not to let it show, but each time he reached for a cane or declined a family outing, a piece of him disappeared. It wasn't just muscle he was losing, it was confidence. What no one told Luis, and what many elders never hear, is that muscle loss is tied deeply to identity, not vanity, not ego, but the quiet sense of dignity that comes from moving freely in the world. And at the root of much of that loss? Inflammation. Silent, creeping, and often unaddressed. That's where vitamin E again plays a quiet but powerful role. Beyond supporting the immune system, it acts as a protector, shielding cells from oxidative stress that builds up with age, poor diet, and chronic exposure to pollutants. This damage doesn't just exhaust the body. It accelerates muscle breakdown, especially in older adults. Without vitamin E, the body's repair systems slow. Muscles shrink faster. Recovery from even gentle activity takes longer. And with each missed step, each faltered attempt, confidence crumbles. Luis began taking a vitamin E complex that his doctor recommended, one that combined tocopherols and tocotrienols, the natural forms of the nutrient. Alongside that, he focused on anti-inflammatory foods: almonds, sunflower seeds, spinach, and small doses of olive oil. It wasn't a diet, it was a recalibration. Within weeks, his movements became smoother. He could get out of the car with less effort, stand at the sink without shifting weight from foot to foot, and slowly, without fanfare, he stopped saying no to invitations. He started showing up again, for dinners, walks, and stories around the fire. What changed wasn't just his strength, it was how he saw himself in the mirror. Shoulders back, eyes brighter. A little slower, yes, but present. The truth is, when muscles shrink, so does our sense of worth. Not because we value looks, but because movement is how we engage with life, how we hold grandchildren, how we sit without fear, how we say yes to the world. Which of these signs did you recognize in yourself or someone you love? Share with me in the comments. Your story could help someone else rediscover their strength. Carl had almost given up. At 87, he'd accepted the quiet routine of limitation. Shorter walks, slower mornings, a life designed around effort. But something inside him still stirred when he saw others his age moving freely. Not jogging or lifting weights, just standing tall, walking without fear, getting up without struggle. What he didn't realize was that behind every one of those strong seniors was more than just willpower. There was nutritional support. Because past a certain point, strength doesn't just come from effort. It comes from chemistry, corrected, nourished, rebuilt. There are 7 key vitamins that work like silent architects in the body of anyone over 70, especially those trying to lose weight and regain mobility. Vitamin D opens the door for muscle activation. Without it, even the best diet and exercise fall flat. Vitamin B12 wakes up a sluggish metabolism and brings energy where there was once only exhaustion. Vitamin B6 helps muscles use protein efficiently, the fuel they need to grow. Magnesium allows those same muscles to relax, recover, and rebuild after every movement. Vitamin K2 ensures that calcium strengthens bones instead of hardening arteries. Vitamin E fights silent inflammation that blocks strength and feeds fatigue. Choline, often forgotten, protects muscle memory and nerve function, helping movement stay fluid and intentional. Together, these nutrients don't create miracles. They create possibility. They give the body a foundation strong enough to support change, whether it's losing excess weight, walking farther, or simply standing with more certainty. Carl began incorporating all of them, through food when possible, supplements when needed. And though he didn't transform overnight, he noticed something subtle. Each week felt less like a battle. His legs ached less. His steps grew longer. He didn't fear the bathroom floor anymore. He wasn't chasing youth. He was reclaiming safety. And that's the truth so many forget. The path to strength at this stage of life isn't about pushing harder. It's about supporting smarter. You've lived decades, carried families, endured storms. You don't need to prove anything. But if there's even a small voice inside saying, "I want to move better," these nutrients are the keys. Which of these signs surprised you the most? Share in the comments. Your insight might be exactly what someone else needs to begin again.